Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you as we celebrate Divine Mercy Sunday. My name is John Dorman, and on behalf of the Apostolate for Family Consecration in Omaha, I would like to welcome you. We would like to thank Spirit Catholic Radio for being a co-sponsor for this event, and to St. Robert Bellarmine Parish for providing the facilities for this live streaming event. In the church today, we have an image of the Divine Mercy, as well as a relic of St. Faustina, the messenger of Divine Mercy, for your veneration at home. We would also like you to offer your prayers today for the Holy Father's intentions, for the Archbishop of Omaha, George J. Lucas, and the bishops and priests of the diocese of those viewing our program today. During these times of isolation due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Apostolic Penitentiary grants a plenary indulgence to those faithful that recite the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, imploring Almighty God for the end of the epidemic, relief for those who are afflicted, and eternal salvation for those whom the Lord has called to himself. Unlike in other years, this need not be done in a church or chapel. A person must fulfill the usual conditions of complete detachment from the affection for sin, sacramental confession, Eucharistic communion, and prayer according to the Holy Father's intentions as soon as possible, but not limited to the usual 10-day limit. The blessings given during this program and Mass are valid if you are viewing this broadcast live. Our speakers today, Scott and Lisa Nance of Omaha, Nebraska, have an affinity to suffering spouses and the miracle of divine mercy. They have been resigned and embraced that they are each other's crosses, which leads to their sanctification. This comes from painful lived experience over the first 25 years of their 28-plus married life. Scott and Lisa experienced a miraculous healing through the divine mercy of God and the intercession of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Scott and Lisa want other couples to experience the healing of divine mercy in their marriages. They have founded a ministry called Marriage Saved by Mercy, through which they hope to tell people about the Lord's mercy and about the sacrament of marriage and how important it is in living out the covenant we enter into with God. Marriage Saved by Mercy is recognized by the Omaha Archdiocese and is under consideration for review as a marriage apostolate with the Marians of the Immaculate Conception, the National Shrine of Divine Mercy in Stockbridge, Massachusetts.
Thank you, John. We would like to welcome all of you who have come to celebrate with us on this great day of grace, Divine Mercy Sunday. My name is Scott Nance, and this is my wife, Lisa. We have been invited to witness how God in his mercy saved our marriage. I was born in Springfield, Illinois, and came from a broken home. From the time I was 8 years old, my mother and father had divorced, and I was raised by my father at that time. There was not a model of the marriage sacrament as I grew up on any level. In my formative years, did not have a foundation on what the design of marriage was supposed to be in a family. The sacrament of marriage was alien and non-existent to me. Coming from an all-male household without any motherly influence paved the way for a disordered view of marriage.
And I'm Lisa Nance. I was born and raised in a metro Detroit area in a town called Clarkston. I came from a large Catholic family, the oldest of 6. My parents were married for more than 56 years. Although the family life was not perfect, given the dynamics of a large Catholic family, my parents were a huge witness to me of what it meant to persevere through daily trials and the forever meaning of the marriage sacrament. Their witness would be my model to follow for the rest of my life.
Lisa and I met in the spring of 1990 in Siesta Key, Florida, and we fell in love immediately. I had just started a career in professional baseball, and she was on vacation with her family at the time. We have now been married for 28 years, but from the beginning, the journey started down the wrong path. As things progressed, we dated, then cohabitated before being married in December of 1991. We had our first child in 1993 and lived in the Denver area for 17 years. During those early years, my wife grew more in her faith, and she began to change in many ways. I found myself resisting the change as my career advanced in professional baseball, which took me farther from our home and the marriage.
We began our life together, adopting worldly ideals. I had a corporate career in the insurance business, which I worked for 24 years, before retiring to live out a call from God to serve His church and ministry, and also to be a full-time mother.
I worked out of state and away from home during my entire professional career, rarely seeing my family. Our marriage relationship would be spent 6 months or more every year apart from each other. Neither of us thought much of it early on, but the impact it would have in later years when we began to start our family proved otherwise.
Our faith then was lukewarm at best from the beginning. We had our own views of what we thought the marriage would be, but God revealed the truth in later years, opening our hearts to His plan and the meaning of the sacrament. With Scott gone, I was turning more and more to prayer and faith. We spent so much time apart, and I was very lonely for my husband. I started to resent him for being gone so much, and I grew angry for not being when he was not with me when I needed him. I worked full-time, and I was raising a child alone, and all that goes with it. I began to question what I agreed to in this marriage. Then I became pregnant again in 1997. I thought to myself, how am I going to take care of another child while he's traveling so much and isn't home to help me? Then I found out I was carrying twins, which overwhelmed me all the more interiorly. I ended up miscarrying the babies, but we still to this day mourn their loss. Then in 1999, we had our youngest child, which was no less a miracle. But in truth, the marriage was beginning to suffer more. My prayer life was intensifying, and I was having mystical encounters with Our Lady, Jesus, and some saints. And I started going deeper with Our Lady and then traveling to Medjugorje. Through my prayer life, the Lord was showing me many things in my soul that I needed to amend and reconcile, as well as the sinful patterns that we were living in the marriage sacrament. I knew we had to change our life, as we were walking a path towards hell. I know this because the Lord showed me this in the state of my soul. But I had to tell Scott we needed to change, and he resisted at this time.
I grew jealous of my wife's relationship with God. From a distorted view, I felt angry that my wife was more concerned with her faith than me. I saw her self-growth as self-righteousness and was blinded by my own sinfulness. I actually thought it was a competition between the Lord and myself for attention. How messed up is that point of view?
Violence then crept into the marriage. The enemy was taunting me and fiercely and vowed to destroy my marriage and family and make my life a living hell. At the same time, Our Lady was drawing me deeper with her in Jesus through Medjugorje. She called me to Medjugorje on multiple occasions to form me as her apostle, but I found myself walking the faith journey alone, without my husband. We were also arguing more, and Scott's behavior became more aggressive towards me.
The Lord called us to move to Omaha, which we did in 2006. We witnessed many miracles surrounding this call to move. We saw how the Lord was always leading and moving in us. We didn't know what the Lord had in store for us. We were stripped from our former way of life in Colorado. We were stripped financially and taken to the poverty level several times. We had tremendous debt that we were never able to overcome at that time. And then we found ourselves homeless for 3 months, having to live with another family during that time, until we bought our first home in Omaha, which was another miracle from God.
We lived in our new home for 1 year, and then Scott was given a promotion to San Antonio. But the Lord told us not to sell the home and that we would be there for 3 years and then return. The Lord said do it, and so it was. We left our new home and moved to Texas.
I was never a big fan of Texas, but with a promotion and Lisa intrigued by moving to a new state, we made the decision to go. My opinion was that Texans love Texas, as they should. I had been there many times, and it just wasn't for me. Lisa loved the San Antonio area. I thought it was the surface of the sun and wanted to get back to the Midwest. I knew it would be difficult to return, but would try to make the best of the situation. During this time in Texas, I had made a quick trip back to Omaha and stopped by her home, which was being rented at the time. It came to me that our home in Omaha was a gift from God and should be treated as such.
In the 3rd year of living in Texas, Scott lost his job. I was in Medjugorje when he was fired. Our Lady gave me a word the last day of that trip and said, "You are now off this cross. Abide in my Son for the rest of your days." I was perplexed at the message until I got home and realized she was saying this to Scott. We found ourselves in a holding pattern for 6 months without any job, wondering what we were going to do, but we never went without during that time. Then the Lord gave the word in prayer that we were going to move back to Omaha. We packed up and moved within 2 weeks, and our stay of 3 years in Texas was as the Lord said.
We moved back, and I started a new job promised by God in prayer. And the offer I received was on the feast of St. Joseph the Worker, which was May 1st. But since then, I had returned to my former ways of life. Lisa was warning me about returning to those former ways, but I didn't listen, and I started down a path of perdition.
I was growing angrier at Scott, and we were going our separate ways. It seemed living in Texas, we were heading in the right direction till we moved back to Omaha. I started to see old patterns creeping in. It seemed that anything I would say, he'd only reject and mock me. So I just quit talking to him. I couldn't fight with him anymore.
Lisa was shutting down more and more. She came to a point where she wasn't speaking to me, and arguments seemed to be a daily occurrence. We didn't have any communication, and I began to stay away from the home frequently. I kept myself busy with many things outside of the home. My prayer life was not consistent. I prayed for the return of our marriage, but would not follow through with any sincerity.
I spent countless hours with the Lord in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament in the image of divine mercy, praying for the marriage, praying for Scott, offering all my suffering, fasting often, and crying out to God to reach him because I couldn't. Seemed love was lost and my heart was breaking. A priest friend at one time said to me, "Lisa, it's not easy being in a loveless marriage. Just keep saying yes." I lived by these words and was kept in my poverty, realizing I could do nothing but wait for God to act and move in his heart. Then I led another pilgrimage to Medjugorje and Fatima on the 100th anniversary. At this point, I was resigned that the marriage was coming to an end and that I would be alone for the rest of my days. I prayed to Our Lady saying, "I don't want to fight with Scott anymore. I just want peace and unity between us. I'm so tired." 2 months later, I came to the decision that I would research legal separation. Scott was around less and less, and I couldn't watch it anymore. I spent many nights alone and in prayer. All outside voices were telling me to leave him, divorce him. And yet Our Lady kept saying, "That is not in the plan of God for you." I sat before the Lord in adoration one day, ready to fill out the legal separation papers. And the Lord said to me, "You don't have to do this, you know." And I said, "There's nothing left. What am I to do? I cannot reach him, and seems there's something else going on." The Lord responded, "Leave everything to me." Just days later, I met with Scott for lunch shortly after and asked the question to him, "Do you want to stay in this marriage or not?" He responded that he did.
The lunch meeting was perplexing but instilled hope. I was uncertain on what to do or what direction to take to save our marriage. At this point, we had planned a trip to Michigan. Lisa's father was suffering from cancer, so we made a trip there to see him and included some sightseeing around the state. While visiting Lisa's family, we went to Mass with her mother, which was at the parish where we were first married. After Mass, I asked Lisa to pray with me as we prayed on our wedding day in front of the Blessed Virgin Mary statue beside the sanctuary near the front of the church. I told her that I had screwed up the first 25 years of the marriage, so maybe I can make up for the next 25 years and do better. However, there was someone else praying before that specific statue. Lisa suggested to go to the rear of the church, where a chapel was located, and pray in front of the life-size statue of the Blessed Mother, Our Lady of Grace, which was special to her. I was not expecting what was about to happen.
We knelt down to pray in front of Our Lady, and for me, she comes to life when I go to her this way, and thus she did again. I saw her raise her hands over us as if she were praying over us, and I heard her say simply, "Continue on in holiness, and God will bless you." But Scott had another experience.
I typically do not have spiritual experiences, which is probably due to the fact that I listen with my head and not with the heart. As I knelt down with Lisa, I just asked for help from our Blessed Mother. It was not a deep prayer or detailed in nature. Then, in the silence of the chapel, I heard clearly, "Take care of my beloved daughter." The voice was not my own. The voice was female. It was firm and direct, but the voice was filled with love and compassion. I knew who it was immediately and broke down, being overwhelmed with emotion.
Scott then stood up behind me and wrapped his arms around me, crying over me. I didn't know why he was crying and why he kept saying he was so sorry, but tears welled up in my eyes as well. I knew something was happening, but to what extent, I wasn't sure. When we returned home is when all would be revealed. I learned that Scott was having an affair, and I was stunned as the truth came to light. I went before the Lord seeking guidance on how to handle this, and should I confront him, which I did as the Lord directed. At first, I was very angry and felt so betrayed, especially what had occurred on our recent trip. I wondered if he was telling the truth or not, having after so many opportunities to come clean with me. But the Lord gave me much peace and consolation throughout the day. When the evening came, we were praying our family rosary, as we always do. I started to feel the tears welling up in me. When we finished the prayer, I began to cry uncontrollably. My tears were coming from the depth of my heart. I felt like every emotion I had was pouring out of me, and I could not stop my tears for at least a couple of hours. And Scott felt helpless, crying out saying he was so sorry it would never happen again, asking for God to help him, and that he hated himself for what he had done. I saw my husband then as a broken man.
The feelings came all at once: anger for what I had done, fear of the sin and punishment, shame for the worthlessness of the action, and hopelessness for losing control and not being able to fix anything. Then, after those 2 hours of pain passed, I looked at my wife, and in that moment, the face of the Lord appeared over her face. I was stunned and froze. I now realized who my wife was and the importance of our marriage.
I felt like I was emptied of all the anger and the hatred I had for him, as if my spirit knew what was going on before all came to light. But a profound love for him filled my heart and my soul after this, and I felt nothing but compassion and love for him. It was in an instant for me, and all I wanted was my husband back and to live a marriage in the Lord, and God fulfilled this desire.
As you can see, the sins of the marriage have been ugly, and we both spent most of the marriage hurting each other because of our own hurts and pains, which we carried from our past, along with additional suffering we started during the marriage. It was through the cross, through the prayer, through tremendous sufferings we have endured, and the Lord, in His mercy, saved this marriage. In 2017, at Christmas, with the help of Lisa's family, she received an unexpected surprise. I remarried my bride at that same church where we were first married at in Michigan 28 years ago. We have a deeper newfound love for each other. We now call ourselves re-newlyweds. I broke the vows of this marriage by my infidelity, but the Lord is honoring and restoring what was lost in sin. We renewed our vows with our hands joined together on a large crucifix, which is a Croatian custom during the marriage rite. We accepted our cross through each other as a sign of our renewed covenant with the Lord.
Has this been easy? No. But God has called us to share our story, not just for our sake, but for the sake of many who are in the marriage sacrament, suffering on the cross as we did. Marriage is not a fairy tale. It is the way of the cross, the path to our sanctification and the sanctification of our spouse. Many couples do not understand this when they enter into the covenant with God and look for an easy way out.
We now ask for your prayers, not just for our marriage, but for all marriages. This story has not been easy for us to share as we opened our lives to all who are watching and listening. But the Lord called us to witness in this way His great mercy, not only for our sake, but for the sake of the marriage sacrament. What God has done in us, He desires for all marriages that are suffering, and He is calling us to proclaim His mercy in this way.
Scott and I both feel, because of the extraordinary time that we are in with this pandemic at hand, what is needed most is trust in the mercy of God. Through our marriage, it has been nothing but a walk of trust for us. That is, we had to trust God would pull us through our darkest hour. Yet He needed our cooperation and our surrender to His will to accomplish His great mercy in us. He took our brokenness, our poverty of spirit, and all of our suffering that we united to Him and accomplished His greatest work. That is divine mercy in both of us. Divine mercy is not a devotion. It is a covenant between God and man, and the reason the Lord suffered and died on the cross for humanity, so that mercy may be poured out upon the whole world.
Jesus, the God of mercy, declared to St. Faustina many insights about trust in Him and how distrust wounds His sacred heart. Jesus said, "How painfully distrust of my goodness wounds me. Sins of distrust wound me most painfully. My child, all your sins have not wounded my heart as painfully as your present lack of trust does, that after so many efforts of my love and mercy, you would still doubt my goodness. My heart is even more wounded by their distrust after a fall. It would be less painful if they had not experienced the goodness of my heart.
How often do we find ourselves experiencing our daily crosses, and our question is, "Oh God, where are you?" And yet we have learned that he's only waiting for us to say yes to him. We can say, "Thank you, Jesus, for this cross that you have willed upon me. I unite my cross with you, Jesus, that we may bear this cross together. I trust that you will accomplish in me what your desire is for me. That is my will, my surrender, and my salvation. Thy will be done in me." We can also surrender our crosses into the hands of Our Lady, who intercedes for us at the foot of the cross. We can think about her and how she gave her yes to God, even when it was her darkest hour, watching her son dying. This is where the Lord did his greatest work of redemption, on the cross.
Jesus also said, "I desire that the whole world know my infinite mercy. I desire to grant unimaginable graces to those souls who trust in my mercy. I am love and mercy itself. When a soul approaches me with trust, I fill it with such an abundance of graces that it cannot contain them within itself, but radiates them to other souls. The more a soul trusts, the more it will receive."
So we can look at the world that is on the cross now in this hour. Not one person on this earth in this moment of time is escaping the cross, accepting or not. Many are carrying crosses and bearing them in their bodies through the sickness itself, or with a loved one who is sick. The church and churches throughout the world unable to gather and worship God as one people. Some are confined to their residences without the company of others. And how many are asking, where is God in this? Do we recognize the Lord? Can we see with the heart what God is doing in our midst? The world is at a standstill in a sense. Think about the words of our Savior. He wants the world to know him and to know his mercy. He said the world will not have peace until it turns to his mercy. Each of us must look inward into our hearts and ask ourselves, have we put God in the first place in our lives?
These words of Jesus are inviting. They are not condemning. The Lord desires nothing but for his bride to give her heart to him. That is, we the church. He is the bridegroom who longs to be espoused to his bride anew, and for her to love him with her whole heart and offer herself to him as he offered himself to her. Divine mercy is a fruit of the marriage covenant between the spouses where Jesus is at the center. Divine mercy is what Jesus asks of us in our marriage covenant, to be merciful to each other as he is merciful to us.
The mystical bride of Christ is an adulterous bride in many ways today, but the Lord longs for her fidelity to him. He only desires to pour himself out as an ocean of grace upon her, that is, we the church. Yet we do not know the hour the Lord will deliver us from this pandemic. We should approach this time during the current conditions that we are experiencing as an opportunity to reflect within, trusting in his goodness. Each one of us should ask ourselves, have I been faithful to my covenant with God, as he has been faithful to us? Let us repeat often the words that he gave us. Jesus,
I trust in you. Thank you.